Hey everybody, in today's video, I'm going to talk with you about the step-by-step process of writing a book. You'll remember in a recent video I talked about, what a book can do for your business in 2021, but I actually got a lot of emails from people asking about what the actual steps are. They seem to draw a blank with, coming up from an idea right through to having a physical book in their hands. So we're going to cover that today. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And so today's video is going to be me walking you through the process of how to write a business book. Nonfiction is kind of the area that I live in. I don't know how Harry Potter and the Hobbit and books like that get written. I'm not that creative. Today's video is really more focused on business leaders and professionals who want to use a book to establish expertise, use as a prospecting tool, step out from competitors in the market, really using a business book as a tool. That's the steps I'm going to go through today. So if you're looking for something fiction related, this is really not the video for you. Let's jump into the different steps that you might want to go through in developing your book. Now, again, not an expert on how different people write books. This is just the process that I use and that I kind of lead clients through as they're looking to build a book on their own. Now, the first step is the idea. You have to come up with an idea of what your book is going to be about. If you're an expert in accounting, the idea would likely be accounting. I traditionally ask clients to consider staying in their lane. If you jump way outside, so let's say that you're an accountant and you want to talk about advertising, unless you have had an abnormal amount of success advertising your accounting practice, it might be too much of a stretch for people to see you as an expert. So again, if you're a lawyer, you might talk about legal things or how to start a law firm if you're a single shingle that's done their own thing. Business development tends to be the area that I write in, although my first book, What Men Don't Tell Women About Business, really talked about what men talk about in the boardroom when women leave the room. The reason why I had expertise in that is I worked primarily with the female market, and I was in the boardroom when women left, and I saw what men talked about when women weren't around. And so I married those two, knowing that if my clients knew what the conversations were behind their back, so they could actually dominate in those situations rather than be negatively impacted by them. So really the first step is just for you to come up with the idea and decide, does it make sense for me to write a book on this? The second step after coming up with your idea, and this is a part that most people miss, which is why their books aren't successful, is you have to determine who the market is for your book. Now, again, when I used the first book, What Men Don't Tell Women, my market was women who felt like they were being negatively impacted in their corporate space and not know why. I wasn't writing the book for men. I wasn't writing the book for HR departments. I was writing that book for women who felt like their professional careers were getting slowed down because of unforeseen circumstances and dynamics that might be happening onto them. So you really want to know who the market is for the book because it's important in the development of the book for you to have that particular reader in mind. The third step, once you have the idea and of course the market, is to choose a muse. Now, in my situation for What Men Don't Tell Women, the muse, right, the person I was thinking about when I was writing the book, and I think this is actually a really impactful way to go about writing a book. And so for me at the time I wrote the book, the muse for the book was my wife, Jackie. I was thinking about her working in a big law firm and lots of dynamics going on. And what would I want her to know about how men act in the workplace if I only had 3 hours to spend with her and then I wasn't available anymore? She was the muse that I had in my mind. For Market Shark, which was my second book, the muse actually were my children. Now, at the time, 2014, my kids were young. My kids were 7 and 4. But I thought to myself, if I could write one book about business development that would give them the fundamentals to be successful, what would it be? And so that's even why I dedicated the book to the kids, is I wanted in my mind to know that I was leaving something behind if I wasn't available for them to learn the fundamentals of business development that would get them the results. After you have those 3 steps done, then step number 4 is for you starting to brainstorm what content you think should be in that book for that market talking to that muse. So I brainstorm just with ideas. I normally get a 3.5 by 5 inch recipe card, and I start writing down ideas just as they pop into my head. I'm not trying to be organized. I'm not methodically going through particular processes. I'm just banging out ideas of what I think should be in that book for that market. And I just throw them, write it, throw it down. Next one, throw it down. I go to the dollar store and buy a pack of 500, probably use 150 or 200 for most books. What's really important at this stage is just to get the ideas out of your head, not deciding if they're good or if they're bad. Then the next step is I take those index cards and I look to see if there are themes that are starting to emerge, right? For Market Shark, I remember I did one on champions, and so I had busted a bunch of ideas about champions, and I had done a bunch about niche markets, so I started to pack those together. And what ends up happening is you start to organize your 3.5 inch index cards. The example that I'm sharing with you is you'll start to see that certain parts are fat and certain parts are thin. And then you have some decisions to make. Do I want to thin out the fat parts, or do I want to fatten out the thin parts? And what has happened in past book projects is I will actually, with Activating Champions as an example, it's such a robust tool on its own. I covered it generally in Market Shark, but then it deserved a book on its own. And so Activating Champions outline came from which I wrote in 2019, was built from the index cards that I used in the brainstorming process of Market Shark in 2013. So Market Shark index cards were further used 5 years later. I hope that makes sense, but I never throw out any book related stuff because there's always magic in there. Once I have all those ideas kind of sorted out and kind of built into themes, then the fifth step is to organize them in the sequential order that makes the most amount of sense. What I know is you can't talk about champions, strategic alliances, or a hunting pack, which are all tools we use at GoCO, until clients know about a sales funnel, niche markets, and 3 questions. And I know that clients can understand how to engage a niche market properly if they can't answer the 3 questions, but I also know they can't answer the 3 questions until they understand how to identify a niche market and determine how to answer the questions for that particular market. Now, this isn't a Zen riddle, but there is a natural progression to how information has to be introduced in order to make it make sense. And so you take all of those bundles of your index cards and start to organize them in an order that would make sense for an adult learner to be able to learn. The 6th step after you've done this, right, and you're looking at your different piles in order, is you start to outline. Now, I like to use an outlining format, which I don't stick to, but I always start to, which is 10 chapters. Each chapter has 5 main topics, and each topic has 5 main points. So if you're following the math on that, 10 times 5 is 50, times 5 is 250. And so I will have a spreadsheet with the 10 chapters. Under each chapter, I will have the 5 themes or things I'm going to talk about in that chapter. And then within those themes, I'll have 5 main points that I want to make. Now, you could do 7 chapters with 3 topics and 5 points per topic. I like to start with 10, 5, and 5, and then I start to whittle it down. You'll see that certain chapters are really thin, other ones are really fat and may need to be broken up. But this is where I start because it takes something that's overwhelming, which is writing a 40, 60, 100,000 word book. Activating Champions was 40,000 words. Market Shark was 100,000 words. I think What Men Don't Tell Women was about 65,000 words. That is a lot of content to write. But if you break it up into 10 chapters, 5 topics, each topic has 5 points, you may have to write on 250 points, you might write 200 words, and 200 words is really nothing. Breaking it up like this is really powerful. It's like the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So I will have my outline done. I normally develop it in an Excel spreadsheet so that I can move things around or grab things and move them around. Once that outline is done, I leave it for a week or 2, right? So once I'm feeling pretty good with where it's at, I leave it. And what ends up happening is my subconscious keeps on running and thinking, you should add this, you should take that out, so that by the time I come back to it a week or 2 later, I've got fresh eyes and I'll make some final adjustment. Then once the outline is where I need it to be, and I should add that 90% of the effort of writing a book is that outline. If you've written a good outline, the writing process is actually quite straightforward. So after I have an outline that I'm really happy with, then I start working on the rough draft. And the rough draft is really just you getting words to the points. I always say to clients, if we're thinking about, like a school paper, your rough draft needs to be a D, right? We're not looking for an A paper, we're looking for a D paper. Basically getting your ideas out on paper to each of those points. And through this process, you're going to start to decide what needs to be added and what needs to be taken away from the book, right? What's easy for you to write, what's hard for you to write, what's easy to fill a page up with, what you struggle to get a paragraph on. And as well, as you start to develop your rough draft, you start to notice gaps in your story. What's missing? Where are you making big jumps? Which is my number one kind of hiccup is I jump ideas, assuming that everyone's going to jump with me and not realizing I have to go backfill. My goal at rough draft is just to get every point that I've outlined some content. After I've done the rough draft, I normally leave it for a week and then I come back with fresh eyes. I read through it from beginning to end, making notes on all of the gaps that I've left in the story, areas that aren't kind of fattened out enough, areas that I run on, which I also tend to do, that need to be kind of put on a diet. And I start to clean up the rough draft into my draft or manuscript. After I'm done working on my manuscript for a week or two, and I'm not working 40 hours a week on it, I might work on it an hour or two every night or a couple hours a week. Once I'm done with my manuscript, which means I've taken a rough draft and made it into a body of work that has most of the holes dealt with, and we've taken a D paper to maybe a C- or a C paper, then again, I put it away. Now, this could be the point at which you bring in an editor, somebody who will look at your manuscript and start to clean it up. Now, I'm always a little nervous about an editor because my voice is pretty specific and it would need to be an editor that understands the way I talk. I like my books to read like I'm speaking to somebody. But for a lot of clients that have done books, this is where they bring the editor in. They give the editor the manuscript, and then the editor goes and starts to mechanic the manuscript. Tighten up the language, make sure what we call a contextual edit, which means that you don't disagree with yourself in the book, and the story makes sense, and then a grammatical edit, right? Punctuation's in the right place, the right tense is being used, all of that stuff. Once the editor or you have gone through this process and tighten it right up, you're now at final manuscript. And at that point, what I like to do is prepare for the publishing process. Now, I own my own publishing house in New York City, but you could self-publish if you wanted, or you could go and try to get a book deal, which it's a bit archaic, but people still do. And what you would do, at least what I do, is I take that finished manuscript, and I say finished because it could still use some polishing, and I give it out to a reader group. And this can be 5 to 10 people. I like to choose people who love what I do and people who don't love what I do, and get them to read it and give it feedback. And what I say is, listen, be brutal. Tell me what you love and what you don't love, what made sense and what didn't, what you think was awesome, what you think was shit, and please send me your comments back, normally within a week or two. I take the reader comments on what worked and what didn't. Sometimes I take their suggestions, sometimes I don't. Most of the time I do because the readers I choose are pretty smart people. I tweak it one more time, and then once it's done, it goes for publishing. Now, the publishing process and publishing your own work is a whole different set of things, which we could cover in a different video. If anyone's interested, leave a comment below. But getting the book done is 99% to publishing. Once the manuscript is done, the publishing process is actually pretty simple. But outlining a book after brainstorming the ideas and then getting that rough draft is about 90% of the work. The last 10%, which is cleaning up your manuscript and then finalizing it, it is 10% of the work and probably the hardest part because you have to learn to kill the baby. And what that means is the book will never be perfect. I can't remember who said it, but I'll look it up. And somebody used the quotation, a book is never finished. There just gets to a point where the author abandons it. And this is 100% true. Your book is never going to be perfect. It's just going to get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm done working on it. And at that point is where you get it out to your readers. And then of course you get it to publish. Anyway, that is my writing process in a nutshell on how I write nonfiction self-help business books. I hope that was helpful for you. And again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'd also be curious in the comments what you think you should write a book on. Now, you all know what you have expertise in and and where you can add value to other people. So I'd be curious in what topic, doesn't even have to be a title or a specific thing. What topic do you think that you should write a book on? Put in the comments below. I'll be really curious to see what you have to say. As always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Give it a thumbs up. Share with an aspiring author that might be stuck with their manuscript and not sure where they're going. Let them watch this because it really is simple once you have a business process. And remember, gladiators eat first, and if they are courageous and a little bit dumb, they undertake writing a business book because they know that the benefit to them and to their readers is enormous. See you in the next video.